1994 NHRA drag racing season stock report. Scott Coletta is a blue chip bet. Joe Amato, winner 2 weeks ago, may pay a good dividend in second position, but sentimental favorite Don Prudhomme gets the widows and orphans investment. In the technology sector, it's John Force. Crew chief Austin Coyle has patented performance, average up. Al Hoffman is second. Not much sizzle, but good steady growth. Chuck Etchells is third, but don't look for payoffs till 95. For Pro Stock leader Scott Jeffrey on the points market has turned bearish. Looking to invest in Warren Johnson? Sell short. The momentum is gone. But rumor has it that a certain former Arkansas investor likes Darrell Alderman futures. The shareholders are on hand to watch the Winston Championship ticker on ESPN Speed World. Welcome, everyone, to NHRA Winston Championship Drag Racing Competition from the 13th Annual Champion Auto Stores Nationals at Brainerd International Raceway in Brainerd, Minnesota. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan, and you talk about gorgeous weather. Well, an overflow crowd at Brainerd, Minnesota can tell you this is as nice as it has ever been for the Champion Auto Stores Nationals. And what's it done for our racers? How about 300-mile-an-hour speeds? In Top Fuel, the top speed in low ET went to a rejuvenated Kenny Bernstein. His brand-new car debuted 2 weeks ago is working out very well. 477 at over 304. In Funny Car, another 300-mile-an-hour run by who else? Al Hoffman. His third on 3 different racetracks. But that's only the tip of the performance iceberg. For the story in Pro Stock, let's go over to Larry Morgan's pit area where they're shooting a new horror movie. Steve?
Right, Mac, and it's called The Oldsmobile That Ate the Avenger. And before the day is over, we may see the sequel. Let me bring you up to date. Winston Pro Stock points leader Scott Jeffrey came into Brainerd that much of a points lead over Darrell Alderman. He too now sporting a new Avenger, but untried. Alderman qualifies number 1 at a 7:14. Scott struggles through 4 rounds of qualifying to only nail down the number 9 spot. But in round 1 earlier today, up against Larry Morgan's Oldsmobile, suddenly Scott's car woke up, but he was late off the starting line. Morgan 7:23, Scott low elapsed time of the round by a mile, 7:16. He loses and passes the points lead to Alderman.
Well, I mean, we've had some problems with the car. They found them, it seems like, for the first round. I just didn't do my job, but, you know, it'll come.
So Jeffrey's Avenger is now a quiet cannon. Scott himself is inside the trailer wondering why they've locked away all the sharp instruments. But now it's Darrell Alderman who has to worry about the purple Avenger eater of Larry Morgan, because in just a few minutes they square off in round number 2. Let me tell you, Larry is wired. Mac, what else is going on?
Steve, let's take a further look at funny car competition. It is hard to ignore the 300.20 mile-an-hour time by Al Hoffman. He qualified number 5 and defeated Gary Bolger in the first round with a great 5:21. His opponent in round number 2, a rejuvenated McDonald's Oldsmobile driven by Cruz Pedregon, now with Bob Brandt as the crew chief. He ran 5:35 when he defeated Jack Wyatt. But the story, it seems to be a litany of John Force in qualifying 5:07. That put him at the top of the qualifying list. And he defeated in his first round of competition Keith Jackson with a great 5:16. That was enough for low ET of eliminations. His opponent in round number 2 will be Chuck Etchells at the wheel of the Kendall GT1 Dodge Avenger. His crew chief, John Medlin, was able to corral the horsepower in that Dodge in his first round victory over Tom Hoover, but he will not have lane choice over John Force in the first round. Now for a look at top fuel competition, here again, Steve Evans.
Dave, crew chief Dick LaHaye probably won't say it. He's a little superstitious, but I will. His driver, Scott Coletta, will be the 1994 Winston Top Fuel champ, especially based on his historic 4 wins in a row. But you know what I like is their battling spirit. They come into Brainerd, you'd think they were an underdog, 2,000 points behind. Take a look at their final qualifying run. Did they lean on this baby? A chain reaction. The motor blows, the supercharger's off, and a tire goes down. Scott's attitude? Hey, not to worry. After that, you'd think, boy, these guys have their backs against the wall. Round number 1 against Pat Austin. Low elapsed time so far today, 479 over 300 miles an hour. But in round number 2, Scott didn't have the elapsed time, but he had the reaction time instead. And he beat Shelley Anderson with a slower elapsed time, 484 to a 483. So who would Scott race in the Final Four? It would either be Corey McClanatt then, or the #1 qualifier for the first time in 2 years, Kenny Bernstein. I think Bernstein and crew underestimated Corey Mack. Corey stepped up with a 489, Bernstein a 491. So Kenny, instead of thinking winner's circle, is now thinking traffic circle. He's out of here. On the other side of the ladder for the Final Four, there's lots of enthusiasm in Joe Amato's pits. After all, that's the crew that ended Scott Coletta's win streak 2 weeks ago in Seattle, right here on ESPN. But they're plenty pumped up in the Snake pits as well, because Don Prudhomme in his final strike tour will meet Joe Amato in the Final Four. Snake has lane choice of 484 over Del Worsham in round number 2. And let me tell you, the Minnesota fans, they like their vibe. Well, Dave, that is the Top Fuel Follies.
Steve, we'll see how the Snake strikes in just a few moments. Right now, it is round number 2 of funny car competition. And the bright yellow Moon Eyes car, driven by Kenji Okazaki, is challenging Gary Dencham. As the burnouts continue, let's take a look at the point standings as they are after round number 1 of competition. John Force, a huge lead over Al Hoffman. Chuck Etchels is third, followed by Cruz Pedregon. And Casey Spurlock rounds out the top 5 in the Winston chase. This match, as far as lane choice goes, is nothing to write home about. Gary Dencham got to pick his lane as a result of a 6:35 elapsed time. You say, what did the Moon Eyes do in the first round? He broke on the starting line, coasted through with an 8:16, while his opponent, Dean Scusa, put his car into the guardrail. Not much damage, Scusa uninjured. Meantime, Dencham, who had qualified 15th, took care of the number 2 qualifier, Gordy Bonin, who in reality took care of himself when the Smokin' Joe's Mustang went up in smoke in that first round competition. Dencham out of Bellflower, California. Kenji Okazaki from Tokyo, Japan. And Dencham just drives away from Okazaki. Look at the scoreboard, 5:33, his winning time. The speed, 277 miles an hour. So Gary Dencham advances to the semifinals. The 1994 NHRA Champion Auto Stores Nationals is being brought to you by Quaker State, the intelligent oil for longer engine life. You're looking into the eyes of Richard Hartman, the driver of the Motorola Dodge. He faces Whit Bazemore when we come back. Back at Brainerd International Raceway, it's 2 of the rising young stars getting ready to do battle here in the Champion Auto Stores Nationals. Round number 2 of funny car competition. In the far lane, the Motorola Dodge, owned and tuned by Johnny West and driven by Richard Hartman. Quite a story for this team this past week. They burned the car to the ground at a race at Spokane, Washington, borrowed a body from Tom Hoover, fitted it on the chassis, and Richard Hartman qualified 14th and beat Casey Spurlock in the first round. His opponent, Whit Bazemore, in the fast orange hand cleaner Dodge Daytona, and qualified 11th in the 530 range and beat Jim Epler in the first round. And if you haven't caught on by now, a lot of the lower qualified cars pulled off some big upsets in the first round. That's who we're looking at here in round number 2. About 5,000 horsepower each as they idle their way into the staging beams. They're set. What a race. First it was Bazemore, then Hartman came on, then Bazemore came on, and finally Richard Hartman pulled it out. Less than impressive, the winning time, 5.60. But the win light shows that Richard Hartman is the winner. Take a look at this. A tremendous advantage as the car of Whit Bazemore coupled up better off the starting line. He just squirted ahead of Richard Hartman. Then in the middle of the track, Hartman starts to come on strong when Bazemore has problems getting a hold of the pavement. That's not engine smoke, that's tire smoke. He's lost traction. And across the finish line by a car length, Richard's the winner. Down at the far end, here's Steve.
You didn't know you'd won for sure, did you?
No, as soon as I shut it off, I couldn't see the finish line. The car started shaking. I don't know if it dropped cylinders or something went out of balance, tire or something. I couldn't see the finish line. I shut it off where I thought it was because it didn't sound real good.
Well, it was good enough to get him the win, and now Richard Hartman from his number 14 qualifying spot is in the semifinals, joining the number 15 qualifier, Gary Densham. Here's the guy that qualified number 1. What can you say about John Force and the season he is having? He has won 7 national events thus far, 4 in a row, and I know it's a terrible pun, but he is the force to be reckoned with. Chuck Etchells is going to try. Chuck qualified number 8 at a 5:28, beat Minnesota and Tom Hoover in the first round. But qualifying number 1 was Force at a 5:07, beat Keith Jackson in the first round. Holds the lane choice here as Austin Coyle tuned him up to a 5:16 in round number 1. But Etchells was not that far behind. The Kendall GT1 Dodge Avenger ran a 5:20. This could be a close race as we ride with Etchells. Whoops, not to be. He slows, and Force goes on and improves on that first round time. As the day has gotten hotter, everybody thought the times would slow down, but not to be. 5:12 at 292 miles an hour. John Force did everything right on this run. He got an advantage off the starting line. His car coupled up to the pavement while Etchells was slipping and sliding with tire smoke coming off the huge Goodyear tires. And look at Force just drive away to 292 mile an hour speed. Here is the guy that is trying to catch John Force in the Winston chase, but somewhere Force has got to stumble to allow Al Hoffman and the Western Auto Slick 50 Dodge a chance. Steve?
John, it didn't matter whether Etchell smoked the tires or not. You just plugged him between the eyes with a 512.
Yeah, you know, it's really amazing. People argue that we work our people too hard here, Coyle and Bernie, and the way we run. But the fact is, match racing pays off for John Force and his race team. We run in these heat conditions. When it's hot, it don't even scare these guys. They run it. It just runs numbers like it don't even know.
Seamless performance.
John Force is one of the few racers that still books in a lot of exhibition appearances. And it is those kind of conditions that allow his crew the knowledge to tune for days like this. Here's Cruz Pedregon at the wheel of the McDonald's Oldsmobile. The cruiser looking very strong this event. He qualified number 4 with a great 5:13. That is Tommy Anderson, the highly talented crew chief on Al Hoffman's Western Auto Slick 50 Dodge. For Anderson, he put his driver into the number 5 qualifying spot at a 5:15. He beat Gary Bolger in the first round. Meantime, Pedregon disposed of Jack Wyatt in the first round. And his new crew chief, Bob Brandt, putting the finishing touches on the tune-up. Brandt, of course, you remember from the glory days of Don Prudhomme when he won 4 consecutive Winston Funny Car titles. Fighting with Al Hoffman. Oh, in a close race. We're seeing some tremendous competition as Hoffman just pulls it out, and he does it based on his driving skills. His elapsed time, a 5:27 at 288. Pedregon actually ran the quicker elapsed time at a 5:25. You say, how can that happen? A quicker car can lose? Well, the lanes are timed separately, and the clocks don't start until the cars leave the infrared beam at the starting line. The reaction time advantage went to Hoffman. He left the line first. Pedregon tried to catch him and ran the quicker time, but failed to do so by just inches. In the semis, Al Hoffman, number 2, trying to stop number 1, John Force. John has the lane choice. The other side of the ladder, Richard Hartman and Gary Densham. The 2 guys coming up from the bottom half of the qualifying ladder. How will they do?
We're going to give you 2 L's on that one. A whole shot victory, 27 beat at 25.
Yeah, he's tough. I mean, you know, we knew we had to leave on him, and it worked. We're happy to be here going rounds. I want to thank Bill Jeter and John Leach. They're the ones that kept me out here, and we're counting points and going rounds, and thanks, guys.
We liked that 300 mile an hour in qualifying, too, didn't we?
Well, yeah, I wish the sun would go away so we could back it up, but it don't look like it here, but maybe Indy.
Maybe later today.
Bill Jeter, of course, from Slick 50. John Leach from Western Auto. Al Hoffman now into the semifinals on his driving skill. Well, the crowd is enjoying the weather, and it is absolutely magnificent here at Brainerd. We'll be back. Back at Brainerd International Raceway in the Champion Auto Stores Nationals, it's the factory hot rods heating up their Goodyear tires as Jim Yates and Butch Abbott get ready to duke it out in round number 2 of Pro Stock competition. Coming into this round, the Pro Stock point standings have been reshuffled. With Scott Jeffreyon's loss in the first round, Darrell Alderman is now the leader. Warren Johnson, the reigning champs, in third. Jim Yates fourth, and Kurt Johnson, who also lost in round number 1, is in fifth spot. This is Butch Abbott. Here's a guy that for race after race failed to qualify. But as soon as he acquired some power, basically from a leased engine out of the Steve Schmidt engine shop in Indianapolis, it is Butch Abbott in the show. Jim Yates, though, is running very good with his Dynamax Pontiac, qualified fifth at a 7:21, beat Tim Freeman in the first round. Abbott actually qualified better, 7:21 in the number 4 spot, and beat Terry Adams in the first round. Just like we saw in funny car competition, the advantage off the starting line can be the difference between winning and losing, and that's why each of the drivers will stage ever so carefully. 1, to get a good start, but 2, maybe to gain a psychological advantage. Tremendous race, and from behind, Jim Yates and his Dynamax Pontiac rips off a 7:23 at 190, and he needed every bit of it. The margin of victory at the finish line, a scant 5 thousandths of a second, because the advantage at the starting line went to Butch Abbott. He just drilled Yates on the Christmas tree, and as they passed this position, had a very slight lead. But that didn't last long, because here came Yates. As he neared the finish line, Yates in the Pontiac was able to claw his way up alongside and then ahead by just inches to take the lead and go to the semifinals. Steve?
I know you'd like better, but all I have for you is a 7:23.
That's pretty good. That's what we run last round, I tell you, and it's a lot hotter and nastier out there. I think it'll be pretty good for this session.
Any difference in lanes for the Pro Stock cars? We see a lot of changing up there.
We switched over to the left, from the left the first round to the right the second round. There seems to be a little bump out there, but we like the starting line a lot more.
And Jim Yates is certainly noted for using the starting line to his advantage. Butch Abbott over to offer his congratulations, as back at the starting line, the burnout procedure's continuing. With our next 2 competitors, it is David Rampy and Steve Schmidt. In the far lane is Rampy with his Winnebago Oldsmobile Cutlass out of the Harold Stout stable of race cars. Stout's RVs up in Greenwood, Indiana, sponsoring a whole host of race cars in all different categories of competition. His opponent, Steve Schmidt, had qualified number 3 with the Dynagear Oldsmobile at a 7:19. He beat Joe Lapone Jr. in the first round, while Rampy came from his number 11 qualifying spot with a time of 7:24 to upset Mark Powick in the first round. Remember a moment ago I referred to Steve Schmidt as the guy leasing the engines? Well, this is the self-same Schmidt. He and his partner Dale Ike beginning now to show some prominence in this field, because Schmidt was the winner 2 weeks ago in Seattle for his first ever victory. But this time he leaves a red light. Steve Schmidt left the starting line too soon, automatically disqualifying himself and wasting a great 7:23 elapsed time. Rampy trailed at a 7:27, 190-mile-an-hour speed, at least in the performance department. He trailed. He crossed the finish line, the automatic winner, because this race was decided the moment Steve Schmidt dumped the clutch on the Oldsmobile. The red light indicating disqualification.
You dodged a bazooka shell on that one. He red lighted away at 23 to your 27.
Oh, well, you know, you got to do it all. You got to drive these things just like you got to run fast, too. And we've really been struggling, and everybody's been steady, and, you know, nobody's really got down. And this Winnebago car, maybe we're headed back in the right direction now.
Up it up a bit.
Oh, we're going to try our best. Thanks.
David Rampy doing double duty. He's also driving a stout Winnebago car in Sportsman Racing today. More coverage from Brainerd and the Champion Auto Stores Nationals next on ESPN Speed World. Back at Brainerd International Raceway, you're looking at the work that's going on Al Hoffman's race car. An engine change taking place. Obviously, something went wrong in his winning effort in round number 2. He's putting a whole new motor in it to get ready to race John Force in the semifinal round. It is Warren Johnson now in Pro Stock Eliminator at the wheel of the GM Performance Parts Oldsmobile up against Mark Osborne and the Pyroil Oldsmobile. The lane choice here going to WJ based on his first round performance, but it's by a slim 0.03 of a second. It was in round number 1 when Mark Osborne had the opportunity to face yet another Johnson. This time it was Warren's son, Kurt. Osborne had qualified number 10 at a 7:23. Kurt Johnson had driven his Anoka Ramsey Oldsmobile to a 7:23 as well. This is a case where the thousandths of a second determine the lane choice, and Kurt has it by some 9,000. Of course, Kurt, the first pro stock racer to go into the 6-second range. That came back in May up at Englishtown. Since that time, he's not fared very well, and he did not against Mark Osborne in the first round. Osborne winning a 7:23, using his starting line advantage to beat Kurt. Now he takes on Dad Warren, the reigning Winston champ, who was the number 2 qualifier at a 7:17. Johnson pulls into the beams to challenge Osborne. What a feather in Osborne's cap it would be if he could take out both Johnsons in succeeding rounds. And that is not too far out of the realm of possibility, because Warren has fallen on hard times. You might say he has definitely lost the momentum, though he does have back the car that he likes to drive the best. This is the one that he had the accident with earlier at Woodburn. It has been repaired, back on the racetrack, qualified number 2. Let's see how he does. Not too well would be the best description, as by more than a car length Osborne heads to the semifinals. 7:24 at 190 to a losing 7:27, and even more importantly, Osborne was much quicker off the starting line than was WJ. We may be able to see it here in our instant replay. Watch the car in the far lane. Oh yes, moves well ahead of Warren Johnson. And when you have an elapsed time that is 0.03 of a second quicker than your competition, and you've got a 0.06 of a second plus advantage off the starting line, that calculates into a margin of victory of nearly a full 1/10 of a second at the finish line. That's what it looks like in distance. So Kurt in round 1, Warren in round 2. That kind of ruined the Johnsons' day.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, 2 things that go together very well is a better reaction time and a quicker elapsed time, and you had them both.
Yes, sir. We've been really running good today. Mike Edwards and the crew, Tim Freeman, everybody, Steve Smith's really got us running good.
Well, I'll tell you, it's tight now, 23, 24 from almost every car.
It's a driver's race. You got to get up on the steering wheel and try to drive that thing.
And is that it better?
Just gives you an idea of the concentration necessary. Gets up on the steering wheel and drives it. Here is Darrell Alderman. We're riding on board with him as he backs up after his burnout. You can see with his left leg, he is actually controlling the pace of the car with the clutch. Throttle just sitting there idling away in the brand new Dodge Avenger. His opponent, Larry Morgan in the Castrol Super Clean Oldsmobile. We're on board watching Larry Morgan pull up to the starting line. Morgan had qualified number 8 at a 7:23, and as we saw earlier, beat Scott Jeffrey on in the first round. Meantime, Alderman was the number 1 qualifier at a 7:14, a new track record. He beat the chassis builder Jerry Haas in round number 1. Well, just a moment ago, we saw Mark Osborne take out the Johnsons in a 1-2 punch, and guess who's got a chance to do that to the Dodge boys? You're right, Larry Morgan and his Oldsmobile Cutlass. Can Morgan rise to the occasion and get another big advantage off the starting line? He used it in round number 1 when Scott Jeffrey on set low elapsed time of eliminations at a 7:16. Intensely concentrating is Alderman, and it is Alderman putting a stop to the dreams of Larry Morgan. 7:18, 192 miles an hour. One of the best shots visually in drag racing coverage today. Riding on board with Alderman and watching the car in the opposite lane. Here's the replay. The advantage off the starting line went to Morgan. He did his job in a near perfect reaction time. But by the time they had reached this point, it was Alderman up alongside, and he easily drove away the power of the Dodge on this day just too much. 7:18 was his elapsed time. Morgan trailed with a 7:24. That sets up the semifinal pairing of Alderman and Yates, and these two guys have got a bit of a score to settle. We'll have more on that in a bit. The other side of the ladder finds a duel of Oldsmobile cutlasses. Mark Osborne and David Rampey. Osborne holding the lane choice. Now, down to Steve.
Well, the Purple Avenger Eater, I guess, is on a diet now. Didn't want another one.
Well, we were trying. You know, we knew that we were in trouble. The track conditions were going to get worse, so we did the best we could do.
You massaged him pretty good on the starting line.
Well, we tried the best we could do, you know. Hopefully we can get this car in the winner's circle at Indy.
See you there.
And, of course, Indy coming up in just a couple of weeks. The 40th anniversary U.S. Nationals, and here's a guy that's looking forward to that, but more importantly, to a possible win this day. Joe Amato trying to capitalize on the winning streak he started 2 weeks ago at Seattle. Back at the Champion Auto Stores Nationals, I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and you are looking at Don the Snake Prudhomme in the midst of his final strike tour. His opponent here in the semifinals of Top Fuel is Joe Amato, and what a shot high atop the wing, looking down on the race car. Amato using the talents of his new crew chief for 94, Jimmy Prock, qualified number 2 with a great 478. He beat Jim Head in the first round with a 491, then a 489 victory over Mike Dunn in the second round. Meantime, Don Prudhomme with his crew chief Wes Cerny had qualified with a 485. That was good for number 6. In the first round, he beat Bob Vandergriff Jr. at a 483. 484 is winning time over Del Worsham in round number 2, and what that indicates is the Snake is on a consistency run that can win races for you, but he's got to stop Amato, who, at least on paper, has got a quicker elapsed time in his bank. And Amato smokes the tires. And look at that drop in cylinders, raw fuel just pouring out of the motor for Don Prudhomme. The 274-mile-an-hour speed indicates he was way down on power. He got a break there, and every racer will tell you, you got to have some luck throughout the day. As Amato coasts to a stop, his luck went bad just a few feet off the starting line when he smoked the tires. So who's the big winner? Well, it's this guy, Scott Coletta, at the wheel of the American International Airways car. Why? He just watched the guy number 2 in the Winston standings go out of competition, losing to the loss of traction. Of course, Prudhomme is number 3. He picked up a few points, but Coletta has got a substantial lead. His opponent here in the semifinals, another of the great young drivers making his mark in Top Fuel racing, Corey McLenithan, at the wheel of the McDonald's car. Now let's go down to the far end of the racetrack where Steve Evans has had a chance to corral Don Prudhomme.
Snake, there was so much raw fuel coming out of this thing, it looked like a crop duster.
Yeah, I'm not sure why either. I'm sure Wes going to have to work on a little bit, but it just put a hole out. You know, it's really common. You know, the air's changing maybe the supercharger, but.
And it sapped it a full tenth to a 94.
Did it really? Well, it's, you know, as long as we got by Joe, you know, he's awfully tough. You never know what the guy's going to do, but I'm just glad again, it's Cole Bennett guys, Wes, all the guys doing a great job.
Let's find out who you're going to race. Dave?
Steve, one thing about Don Prudhomme's final year as a driver, he certainly has not lost the intensity or the desire to win or the skills. Talk about skills, the guy in the red shirt's got lots of them. That's Dick LaHaye, the crew chief for this young man, Scott Coletta. He qualified number 5 at a 482. His opponent, meantime, Corey McLenithan, qualified in the number 9 spot at a 4.90. Earlier in competition in round 1, Coletta had that great 479. We saw that earlier, and he ran a 484 to beat Shelly Anderson in the second round. Meantime, Corey Mack used a 5 flat in the first round to put away Michael Brotherton, then improved to a 489 over Kenny Bernstein. Dropping the cylinder was Corey Mack, and Scott Coletta blasts out a 487 at 298 miles an hour. That puts him in the finals and definitely does one thing that will bolster that crew. It earns him the lane choice against the veteran Don Prudhomme in the championship round of the Champion Auto Stores Nationals. Meantime, in the Pro Stock pit area, the crew hard at work on Jim Yates' Dynamax Pontiac. They're going to need every bit of advantage they can get. They race Darrell Alderman in the Pro Stock semifinals coming up next. Steve?
You truly enjoy racing Don Prudhomme, and you're going to get the chance, and you can put him in any lane you want.
Yeah, that's good, and I think it'll make a difference here probably, but maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we'll go up there and give it our best shot. This guy here, he's kind of fun too.
They love to play jokes at each other, and some have been classics, right, Mac?
You bet, Steve. Like the time Scott Coletta found the Corey Mack Fan Club license plate on his team car hauler. We'll have more from the Champion Auto Stores Nationals coming up next. The question is oft-times stated, will the brash impatience of youth be able to overcome the years of experience of the veteran? Well, here's a young man, Richard Hartman, who certainly hopes so. He's the young driver of Johnny West's Motorola Dodge Daytona. His opponent is the veteran. That's Gary Dencham, wheeling the car tuned by this man, Richard Bays. Now, Dencham at the wheel of the Brico Plating Artesia Concrete Oldsmobile has been at this sport since the late 1960s. In fact, on the West Coast, he was legendary at racetracks like Orange County International Raceway, Irwindale, and the whole host of racetracks that were so prevalent throughout the 70s and 80s in Southern California. Now here he is at Brainerd International Raceway, trying to make his first ever final round appearance at an NHRA national event. And he does it. How about this? Gary Dencham into the finals with a very conservative and consistent 541 at 255 miles an hour. Hartman fell off pace just a bit at a 552. And as good as that 541 looks, he's going to need a whole lot more if John Force is able to continue running the way he has, not only in qualifying, but throughout the earlier rounds today. His opponent here, the number 2 man, and we're riding on board with him. In the Winston chase, this is Al Hoffman, the Western Auto Slick 50 Dodge Daytona. But Force is definitely the class of the field. A 512 the last round earned him the lane choice over Hoffman's 527.
I'm so happy for you, I'm not sure I know what to say.
It's been a long time since Orange County, hasn't it, buddy? I'll tell you.
How many years to get to this point, this final round?
Oh, I got 25 years in NHRA racing, and we'll be proud to race anybody that's up there. I guarantee you we'll give it our best shot.
You dropped a cylinder that time, ought to run pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's gonna. You know, the guys are tweaking on it. It's looking good. Richard, Ed, Army, everybody's just working their tail off.
If you do race John Force, he's one of your best pals in the world.
Yeah, no slack on that one, though. We'll nail him if we can, I'll guarantee it. Thank you.
Gary Dencham, a school teacher during the week in Bellflower, California, now into the finals of Funny Car. Under the body with Al Hoffman, Tommy Anderson, the crew chief, making a final check. The rest of the crew making sure all is well, as Austin Coyle does the same for his driver, John Force. As lots of people say, Austin Coyle is the hottest crew chief in the business today. And, of course, he relies a lot on the talents of Bernie Federley. Force has assembled quite a team indeed. Hoffman, remember, put a new motor in, trying to beat Force. Look at that. John Force blasts out the quick elapsed time of eliminations of 5:11, 291 miles an hour. Hoffman slowed to a 5:34. Absolutely unbelievable performance out of the Castrol GTX Chevy Lumina. So the finals will pit 2 longtime friends, 2 longtime racers from the West Coast, John Force and Gary Dencham. Force holds the choice of lanes. Before we get to the finals, let me take a moment to urge you to join NHRA. Why? You get 48 issues of National Dragster for only $52 a year. And if you call right now, you get a jacket patch, a pin, a decal, a rule book, and this. Drag Racing 93. Make that call today to the number on your screen. Steve?
John, you have always talked to yourself. Now you've got the entire category doing it. A 5'11", unbelievable.
Well, I ain't taking the credit. I'm starting to think Coyle and Federley are underpaid. I may have to get a real job just to take care of these guys. But you know, what can I say? Their old heap just trucks down. It does it every round. So, you know, all the boys out there that pay the bills on this old heap, they ought to be plenty proud, especially these 2 guys. So what can I say?
Somebody said to me, they got to be cheating to run this good.
Well, they're cheating. They ain't telling me. Of course, they don't ever tell me nothing. The round before, I gave Etchel's crew chief an opinion on the heat because Coyle told me, and then the guy said thanks, and he ran a 20. The round before, and Coyle said, Forrest, don't tell things that you don't understand. Sorry, boss, I'll just shut up.
That day will never happen, I can guarantee you. At Brainerd International Raceway, we're set for the semifinals in Pro Stock Eliminator. And here's our battle of the Oldsmobiles, the Winnebago car, driven by David Rampey. Donnie Osborne, his crew chief, turning on the onboard recording device. In the opposite lane, the Pie Royal Oldsmobile Cutlass, driven by Mark Osborne. Osborne now in the semifinals. 2 weeks ago, he red-lighted away his shot in round number 1 up at Seattle. Both drivers taking their time about staging. No particular war going on yet. The engines have not come up to full RPM. Now they do. And it is Mark Osborne at a 7:27. He got the advantage off the starting line, a speed of 190 miles an hour. Identical elapsed time for Rampey, but Rampey was left at the gate. As our replay will show you, take a look at the Pyro car in the far lane. Oh, perceptibly moving ahead of David Rampey. And that gives rise to the thought that if Osborne can keep driving like that, he may win his first ever NHRA national event title. Down to the far end, here's Steve.
You called it a driver's race, and you were right. Both of you ran 27, but you cut his throat on the starting line.
Yes, sir. I got a lot of ridiculing after that deal in Seattle about 2 weeks ago from my pit crew and everybody, and they used to call me an old driver, and I just want to do a better job for them. I need to treat those guys right.
Final round.
Yeah, I need to get one. I need to win one bad. I really want it bad for Pyro and me and the crew.
Well, it sort of lays out the goals for Mark Osborne in the finals here at Brainerd. He will race one of these two cars, Darrell Alderman and Jim Yates. Earlier, I told you about the score to settle. Well, this was the guy that suffered at the hands of Jim Yates 2 weeks ago in Seattle. What a race that was, because it was Alderman and Yates coming up in round number 2 of competition. I told you earlier that a lot of drivers try to use the starting line to gain a psychological advantage. Well, Yates won one of the biggest starting line battles ever. He delayed staging. Finally, Alderman came in, and then Yates just sat there. As starter Buster Couch counted, then through the switch, Yates rolls in just in time, times it perfectly, gets the win. Earlier, Steve talked to all three involved.
Alderman hasn't forgotten Seattle. Starter Buster Couch hasn't forgotten you at Seattle.
I haven't forgotten Seattle either. I kind of relish in that thought. Hopefully we'll be able to pull it off again here.
Would you go for that tactic again?
That wasn't really a tactic. You know, Darrell and I run hard when we run up there, and everybody's back here is working so hard on this car right now, and we know the Dodge has got a little advantage in performance. We got to even it up as best we can.
You know, I don't think there'll be much of a staging game or anything, because I don't think Buster's going to put up with much.
I'm going to tell you the truth. I should have red lighted Gates before. He gave a hard time. I tried to red light him, so I think we go back to the old deal. If I know I'm going to red light him, I'm just going to call the tower and tell them they're out, and they'll be out no matter what the electronics say.
Whoa!
Well, that's one way to look at it. Jim Yates would probably have a different point of view, but let's see what goes on here. They're in the pre-stage beam. They're about 6 to 8 inches away from the actual starting line. When they reach that point, it is indicated by the second yellow light at the top of the tree. Alderman's in. Yates is in. And Yates nails him again. Look at this from our onboard camera. The Dodge trying to pull up, and runs out of real estate. Tony Yates sees the win light and celebrates as her husband, Jim, goes to the finals with a 7:28 at 190 miles an hour. There was no staging battle at the starting line. This was just pure driving skill for Jim Yates. The total difference between the reaction times, 13 hundredths of a second. A huge advantage going to Jim Yates. The losing elapsed time for Darrell Alderman, 7:17. Believe it or not, a 7:28 beat a 7:17. Who says the driver doesn't count in drag racing? Mark Osborne's got the lane choice, though. He ran quicker in his victory over David Rampey than Jim Yates did over Darrell Alderman, so Osborne will pick the lane. Steve?
I know it's the last thing you want to hear, my friend, but another hole shot for Yates has punished you.
Yeah, you know, he's got my number, I guess, Steve. You know, all I can do is congratulate him. He's doing a good job.
You've done it to so many people yourself.
Yeah, you know, that's just the way it goes in racing.
I think he does have his number.
Steve, Darrell Alderman's going to remember these two races, Seattle and Brainerd, for a long time to come. Back in the pit area of Gary Dencham, he's getting ready for the challenge of a lifetime, racing John Force. That's Gary Bolger, the driver of the Dale Creasy car, working with the Dencham crew, trying to help out a little bit, finding some way, maybe, to stop the onslaught of Ford. Here's the finals in Pro Stock. Oldsmobile versus Pontiac. The Dynamax car of Jim Yates made it here on a whole shot advantage, and he hopes to be able to take advantage of that against Osborne. And of course, that is the same tactical approach that Osborne and the Pyroil crew will be taking with the Oldsmobile Cutlass, because they got past the semifinals with David Rampey by doing the same thing, getting a big advantage off the line. Tremendous amounts of concentration required to drive any car in competition, but these Pro Stock cars, particularly with the number of things that the driver has to do to get a perfect lead. Jim's wife, Tony, knowing that this team is due 3 times this season, they have been in a final round. This is their 4th appearance, and they have yet to take away a win at an NHRA national event. Mark Osborne making a rare final round appearance with his Oldsmobile, also in the same category. He has yet to win, so a first-time winner will result from this matchup. The engine's limited to 500 cubic inches. They run through 2 Holley 4-barrel carburetors on pumped gasoline, racing gasoline. Very sophisticated in the suspension systems. The bodies themselves must retain a stock appearance, and they have to go through a template check through the NHRA Technical Services Department to make sure the bodies follow the proper configuration. The question is, who'll lead first? Mark Osborne did, and he lost because he left too soon. You gotta be on time, and Osborne was early. He left the red light on the starting line. Dick Maskin, the crew chief, and Tony Yates celebrating as Jim takes his first national event title at the wheel of the Dynamax Pontiac. There is the deciding factor, the red light by Mark Osborne. So Yates solidifies his hold on 4th. Darrell Alderman is the leader coming out of Brainerd. Scott Jeffrey on 2nd, WJ 3rd, and Kurt Johnson number 5 in the Winston point standings.
We've said it for over a year, Jim. You're just a win looking for a place to happen, and that place is Minnesota.
Thank God we finally got our first win. I tell you, it takes a big load off of us. You know, as hard as the crew's been working, Dick Maskin has been just working his tail off, and the whole crew down there, my wife Tony, and Dynamax has been such a good sponsor, and Pontiac is stuck behind us. It really feels good to come through at a time like this.
A beautiful 722, and Dick Maskin is the Sears Craftsman crew chief of the event.
I tell you, he works hard for it. He earned that.
I know that. First time.
And Jim Yates can take a bit of the credit. Remember back in the semifinals when he whipped up on the Dodge? More finals coming up next. I've been trying to figure out how you could equalize the competition between Gary Dencham and John Force. And my first answer and solution is to give Dencham at least a 16th of a mile head start, because Force is so overpowering in this category. From his 5:07 in qualifying to the 5:11 in the semifinal, he definitely has got everything going his way on paper. And Dencham has to shut off as he heads toward the center line, and look at this, he continues with a 5:13, 291 mile an hour charge. John Force and the Castrol Chevy Lumina moves to the winner's circle for the 8th time this season, and a record-tying 5 consecutive wins. Back at the starting line, top fuel final, it is Scott Coletta with the lane choice. Over the Skull Bandit, driven by Don Prudhomme, and Coletta making yet another final round appearance. This string started all the way back in Columbus, Ohio, back in June. He has been in the finals of every race since that time. Down at the far end, here's Steve and John.
John, with that win, a 2,500-point lead towards yet another title.
Well, that's what we're after, Steve. And I'll tell you what, racing Dencham was probably more pressure than I've had. He's got 25 years of not winning a national, and it was tough. But we're excited, and you know what? I think Coyle and Bernie's going to get that raise. I'll have to talk to Castro and Jolly Rancher and the boys, but we're excited for everybody. We're just glad to be here. And Ernie, we're still praying, buddy.
Needless to say, the thoughts of everyone at this race on Ernie Urban, injured so critically in that crash at Michigan. John's got the big lead over Hoffman. Chuck Etchell's third, followed by the Cruiser, and Hollywood is number 5. The Skull Bandit, Don Prudhomme, the American International Airways car of Scott Coletta. For the 6th consecutive race, Scott Coletta is in the finals. He has only lost one final round confrontation 2 weeks ago to Joe Amato. A picture-perfect win for the Skull Bandit. He beat him on the starting line. He beat him in elapsed time. The veteran and the kid, and this time experience prevailed. 479 for the Snake at 294 miles an hour. Scott Coletta trailing with a 484, and he got beat bad off the starting line. Look at Prudhomme and the advantage. The wheels up. He just drives away from Coletta. You don't realize it at that point, but Prudhomme had the race won because Coletta was unable to challenge. When your opponent runs a 479, you better have a great run going as the Snake strikes once again on the Final Strike Tour.
The 479, that's Snake style. Break their backs.
Oh, it's, man, yeah, Wes, all the guys, what a job, you know, Wins, Purelator, all the people that stuck with us, Goodyear, Pontiac, I can go on and on.
And you left first on the kid.
And I left first, yeah, man, I had to, you know, I mean, I'm retiring, but let me tell you something, I'm not doing it because I don't think I can drive anymore. I just needed a good crew behind me, and next year, absolutely, I'm retired, not coming back, but I'll have a good kid in the cockpit, trust me, and I'm going to enjoy the sport. It's fantastic, and I love it, and I love the spectators.
Wow. Who says you can't get emotional in this sport? Don Prudhomme moves to within 260 points of Joe Amato in the Winston chase. Scott Coletta still with a big lead. His dad Connie is in 4th and Corey Mack in the number 5 spot. The 1994 NHRA Champion Auto Stores Nationals has been brought to you by Allied Signals Autolite Spark Plug. Guaranteed for 2 years, no matter how far you go. And by the Valvoline Performance Team. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Brainerd. Coverage of the NHRA Champion Auto Stores Nationals has been a production of Diamond P Sports in association with ESPN.